Hey everyone! Today we're going to be talking about subject-verb agreements, and so please make sure that throughout this video you have out your Cornell notes and you are taking notes to help you remember some of the rules that we're going to go over. So the first thing that I kind of want to get you to write down is just our essential questions for today. And we are actually just going to talk about some of the trickiest examples of subject-verb agreement and how these can be used correctly in writing. So go ahead and take a moment to jot down those essential questions, and we'll start filling in the rest of our notes. Okay, so the first thing I just want to clarify is some terms before we get into really looking at some of these rules. So when we're talking about subject-verb agreement, there's two things going on there, right? We have the subject of the sentence, also usually a noun, so like dog, or think like a person, the action, or the person that's doing the action or thing that's doing the action in a sentence. Then we have the verb, which is the action or what's happening with the subject. And so we have to make sure that in writing those things match up. So if we have what's called a singular subject, we have a singular verb, such as the dog chases the cat. If we have plural, that means, remember, that there's more than one, so dogs, and the verb becomes chase the cat. So just kind of know that when I'm saying those words subject and verb and agreements, that's kind of what we're talking about, that these things match up. Okay, so in your notes, I know it's been a bit since we took Cornell notes, so I want to make sure that you know in the left column we should be putting kind of those essential questions, and in the right column you're going to jot down maybe the grammar rule and potentially an example or two to help you kind of remember. So feel free as we're going. I'm not going to necessarily pause the video or give you time in the video, so feel free to just do that yourself if you need more time to get things written down. All right, so our first question, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, is what verb should you use when two subjects are connected by or nor? And that's kind of tricky because, again, it looks like we have two subjects, but you're going to see we're going to do something with the verb here in just a second. And so in the left column, you're going to write that question. The answer to that question, sorry, I went a little out of order, is that we use a singular verb, actually. Okay, so you might jot that down. Sorry, I'm getting out of order. You might jot that down in the right column. That even though it looks like there's two subjects, if they're connected by or nor, we actually use a singular verb. And I'll give you an example here in a second. Okay, so one example is neither Scott nor Susan expects me to be in class today. So notice, even though we have two subjects, or nor makes them sort of singular. And so Scott expects me to be in class, or Susan expects me to be in class. We treat them separately, and you have a singular verb. Now, obviously, if you have plural subjects like friends nor teachers, it's going to be a plural verb because even individually those things are plural. But remember, we take them separately because of this or nor. And then finally, if you have the word I, like either Dave or I am destined to find the golden ticket, we typically just look at I and make the sentence read so that it makes sense with I. So I am destined to find the golden ticket. So make sure maybe that your notes at this point look like this. You know, what verb should you use when two subjects are connected? You've got the question, or nor means, and you should be filling in that we use a singular verb, and or whatever matches the subject. We treat them as singular entities. And so then make sure you also maybe have one or two examples down to kind of help you remember that. All right, our next question. What verb should I use when a singular indefinite pronoun is the subject? That sounded really wordy. I don't actually need you to really know what singular indefinite pronoun means. in a minute, I'm going to give you some examples of that to put in the right column. But go ahead and jot that question down. Okay, and so here's kind of the rule that you might want to write in the right column. The words each one, anybody, anyone, somebody, someone, all of these kind of words, those are our singular indefinite pronouns, and they might sound like they're talking about more than one person. So for example, if I say everyone in the class, I'm probably talking to more than one person, but technically they are actually singular and require a singular verb, and so that's kind of tricky. So for example, each of Dave's friends is going home to play video games. This sounds like it's a plural subject, right? Because we have friends, but really if we look back at each, that implies that we're talking to one individually. Each one of Dave's friends is. So we want to kind of ignore that and just focus on that singular subject. And so again, guys, I would make sure that you have the rule. Definitely have some of these singular indefinite pronouns written down. Again, I don't need you to necessarily know this term, but I need you to know that these words mean that we have a singular verb. All right, our next question, what verb should I use when a collective noun is the subject? And I'm going to tell you what that means in a minute, but go ahead and get that question written down. Okay, so collective nouns are really tricky because they are words that imply that there's more than one person, but they're actually acting as a group, and so they take a singular verb. So for example, group, team, class. Those, again, technically there's more than one person, but typically we're treating them as one group, and so they get a singular verb. So for example, the team of swimmers is going to mention Dave's name tonight. Again, is there more than one person? Yes, but they are acting as a team or a group, so they get this singular verb. Now again, of course, you guys, if the original noun is plural, like teams, then that's a plural verb. But we just want to make sure to look not necessarily at the individuals when we have these collective nouns, but that original noun that refers to them as that group. All right, we're going to do some practice, so some questions should be popping up for you here in just a second. All right, we're going to do our last 3 tricky rules. So question 4, and it looks like it cut off here a little bit at the bottom, but it's what verb should I use when there is a phrase in between the subject and the verb? So again, that word that's cut off is verb. And so this is tricky, you guys, because sometimes people can be misled when there's something that's happening between the subject and the verb. And so what we have to remember is that the verb always agrees with the subject, not with something in between. And I'll show you an example here in a second. So if I have something that says like the black couches as well as the Mickey Mouse picture are very stylish, this is kind of tricky because it might sound like I'm talking about the Mickey Mouse picture, which is just one thing, it's singular, but really the subject is this initial thing, the black couches, which is plural, so we get that plural verb. So typically you guys can tell if something doesn't matter if the subject's not there, if there are commas surrounding it, or sometimes if you have a phrase in between that starts with who, that, or which, that noun is going, or the subject is going to be before that. So for example, the chairs that Dave left on the patio, it's not the patio, it's the chairs are soaking wet. All right, next question. What verb should I use when the subject is here or there? That can be kind of tricky because here or there, you know, is that singular or plural? What does that need to agree with? And so when sentences start with here or there, when that's the subject is actually going to follow the verb. And that's why it's tricky, because the sentence might start with here or there, but the subject is going to come after the verb. So let me show you an example. There is a delicious slushie in Dave's possession. So again, we're going to kind of ignore there because we can't really tell if that's singular or plural. And we're going to look after the verb here for the noun, which is slushy. So one slushie, it's singular, is our singular verb. Okay, last question. What verb should I use when the subject is a number? Sometimes that can be a little bit tricky. And so numbers that are greater than 1 take on plural verbs, which I'll show you an example in a minute, and I think most of us probably know that. However, if you have parts of a whole, which means fractions, that takes on whatever verb the actual subject is. So let me show you an example. Generally, again, numbers that are greater than 1 are plural. There's more than one. So Dave hopes that 2 books are enough to last him for the long flight. 2 books, that's plural, so are is our plural verb. However, if we have a fraction, so for example, 2/3, we have to look at what the fraction is describing to figure out the subject and to thus figure out the agreement with the verb. So for example, 2/3 of Dave's brownies are already gone. We're going to ignore the fraction and look at the subject right here. We're talking about brownies, that's plural, okay? And so the verb, is also plural. All right, we're going to do some final practice, so you should see some questions popping up on your screen.